Welcome to the Influencer Marketing Blueprint, where we teach e-commerce brands the three-step formula that drives revenue, not just likes. I'm Cody Wittick.
And I'm Taylor Lagace, and we're here to guide you to influencer marketing success. Let's get started.
How do you want to kick us off? All right. So let's dive into what the current model of influencer marketing is. So Taylor, you want to tee us up with what the current model of influencer marketing is?
I would love to. Current model influencer marketing, what we would probably call the former model or the broken model, is initiating relationships with influencers in a transactional way. In the traditional pay-for-post model, where brands or agencies will contract and identify and work with influencers where they reach out and say they want that influencer to post about their brand in exchange for product or in exchange for compensation. And that's the way that they initiate the relationship, which can lead to so much trouble. Well, maybe not trouble per se, but there's just a better way. But why would you say that is the former model or like the current model? What we would say is the former model or the broken model. But yeah, I mean, with that being the case, would you add anything to that, one, to define the current landscape? And then two, how would you elaborate on why that's a bad way to go about influencer marketing, even though it's the generally accepted practice?
Well, I think even just let's dive back into what the past model has been and what it still currently is, which is, what deliverables do we consistently see in the marketplace? Pay for posts, like you said. So Instagram stories. I mean, pretty much placements on all platforms, just looking at influencers as distribution channels.
Yeah, that's a good point as well.
So they just look at meaning many brand owners, agencies, really in general. The number one value add of an influencer is them as a distribution channel. It's their audience. It's them, and they say that it's trustworthy. They've built trust with an audience to an extent that's true. Or you have like a macro celebrity that's like a big name that comes with a lot of clout, and their social following represents that as well. But they mainly look at a distribution channel, new audience acquisition, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So what's broken with that model, and we can kind of go into our respective backgrounds as well, which we both dabbled in that world a ton. But what's broken with this model is that how I would immediately answer that, or what immediately comes to mind, is the constant one-off drug that you have to be hitting, especially with micro influencers, or how we would define that as sub 150,000 of following. You constantly have to find new people to work with because it just remains a one date and done, or for lack of a better phrase, hit it and quit it, and we're on to other
Easy. We're
things.
live here.
On to other things with other influencers. It's kind of just, hey, Taylor, we want to pay you this amount of money for these amount of posts. Thanks, great. We don't want to dive into a bigger partnership because we want to assess how this performs first. I certainly phrase it that way a ton. See how it performs, and then most of the time it's underwhelming, right? So then you move on to another person. You constantly have to be finding these new people, which
Right.
creates the
Well, while leaving a pretty poor impression on that last person you worked with, not even getting them as a genuine product adopter or brand advocate.
which has led to those platforms such as, FU Pay Me. That's basically a glass door for influencers of brands that have used and abused.
Yeah, I think we would both argue as well the pay for post model in general is used and abused across the board, with some schmoozing involved if the person actually ends up working, which is Not very many at the end of the day in this model. Um, so that's good. Well, if they're it sounds like, and just for the listeners, viewing influencers as distributors is a broken lens. So what's the right way of looking at influencers?
Yeah, we would say that viewing them as creators first, so professional creators of content, just viewing them as really valuable content creators, and those being the number one asset that they
So
can provide.
is the distribution worthless?
You and I might have a different take on that. I wouldn't say it's necessarily worthless. I would just say it's very low on the totem pole in terms of importance uh, in ranking, because it can be valuable eventually, and I think we could talk about that as well. Is that pay for post eventually does potentially make sense after we've done certain things, and we can go into that as well. But
No way. The influencer pay for post model is completely dead, Cody. No, I'm kidding. There's a time and place. Um, no, I would agree with you. I I just think the distribution is like Cody is saying. It's down the list. It's not the biggest value add. I think we're over indexed on that uh, between the two of us, though, just because that's generally, like you've already alluded to, has been what's been accepted as the biggest value add of influencer marketing. Their power and influence over their followers when posting content organically. Whereas, no, it's their content creation. It's the best content and the most cost effective content. And why is their content though the most valuable part outside of them posting organically? Where else can we use that content?
give us the answer. Give me the goods.
The best place to leverage it, Facebook ads, without a doubt. Getting as much of it as possible in there, where creative is king and can help scale. It's a word we like to use and a word that we've been recommended not to use. So I'm gonna go ahead and do it. So, anyways, scale your ad account um, at greater profit margin. Um, yeah, the way that you can go about influence marketing, though, not in the pay for post model, will get a ton of it for you and very cost effectively.
Let's back up a little bit here and think about, because when we're talking about content creation ability, we're not necessarily talking about macros that are great content creators like The Rock or a Jessica Alba. Although I
Mm-mm.
haven't looked at their profile, I don't know if they're producing like high quality, great creative video content. Um, but maybe at that level, it doesn't matter. Maybe if you're leveraging that content just because of such a powerful name, would you agree or disagree with that?
Well, the well, even to back it even further, I would also just add, I would never work with a macro right off the jump, ever, ever, ever. Um, let's do our legwork first by working with some micros and work our way up to a macro. So just want to make that clear as well. You don't want to just go swing for the fences in the major league, and if you haven't played t-ball yet. So let's backtrack slightly. But I would say The Rock and Jessica Alba probably have phenomenal content creation ability. I mean, we saw The Rock live at the Super Bowl just this past Sunday. He crushed it. Um, but again, I wouldn't go right into influencer marketing looking to partner with The Rock, regardless of how much money I had. There's just a better approach than just immediately working with him.
And how come that is your philosophy, or our philosophy, I guess, is why are you avoiding the macro? Maybe touch on your background a little bit and experience with macro celebrity talent.
Yeah, so yeah, that's a good place to to segue into that. So out of college, I worked at an NFL marketing agency where we worked with guys like Aaron Rodgers, Clay Matthews, just some household NFL names. They had a roster of like 150 players, where I was doing marketing endorsement deals on behalf of these guys. Think State Farm commercials with Aaron Rodgers, those sorts of things, where brands would come and fork up 50,000, 100,000. I mean, Aaron Rodgers could get deals in the millions very easily um, for these influencers um, to do some posts. I mean, Aaron Rodgers would do a Twitter post, one line, 50K. Um, and the people I was working for, not to throw them under the bus, but just to be transparent about the model of influencer marketing that a lot of these agencies exist within that represent talent. They don't care about the brand. They care about their talent and getting them paid as much as possible without any attribution whatsoever. Aaron Rodgers isn't posting some sort of tracking link on his post. They're not selling sales. They're selling stardom. And they're like, when they're on the phone with brands, they're saying, you just need to tell these brands, of course, Aaron Rodgers is going to give you a massive lift in performance. What do you? It's Aaron Rodgers. All you need to do is pair his name, his likeness, his image with your brand, and it will take it to the moon, regardless of what you're seeing on the back end in sales, this and that, and otherwise. But what would happen? Long-winded answer here. We would never get repeat customers. Never. They'd work with you once, unless you're like an NFL partner and you just have massive budgets like P&G to spend. Like they just do it because they're allocating budgets towards these things. But the mid-tier brands that weren't partners, one and done, because it just wouldn't work. It wasn't what we were actually selling them on. It wasn't what we were actually doing on their behalf through these influencers that were NFL players. It wasn't moving the needle.
Did you ever have brands come back to you, even those mid-tier brands, and come back to you and basically say, "Hey, like these were the results." Either ask for a refund or ask for kind of like, "Hey, we would want to do this again, but at significantly less because we can only see so much data on Google Analytics or things of that nature." Was there ever any brands that came back to you
All
speaking
the
to like
time.
the lack of attribution?
All the time. And pissed. It's just, and again, oh man, I used to go to sleep like screaming into my pillow, and just all honesty, did not like the work I was doing whatsoever. And they teach you just to continue to harp on, hey, this will give you a brand lift, your brand equity will go through the roof long term. This person's a star. Your brand will, reap the benefits. If you're not seeing it now, you will. And it's just like you're just continuing to beat around the bush, and it's just complete nonsense. And to be honest, I drank the Kool-Aid in the beginning and I believed it. But then as time progressed, you're just like, no, this stuff does not work. We have no repeat customers here. And they're pissed. So it's broken. They're paying massive upfront inflated rates for results that aren't delivering.
Do these brands ever have usage rights or the ability to repurpose any of these posts or pieces of creative or content, or
Um,
screenshot the Twitter post from Aaron Rodgers and put it on their website or things of that nature?
if they paid, it'd be another massive hiked up rate. Yes, but NFL players a lot of the time are not great content creators, so it's not like the best content. And a lot of time it's very easily recognized that this was paid for. So a lot of the content, a lot of the partnerships didn't come off in this authentic manner. That's why the Hulu like advertisements are genius, where it's just like they over-index themselves on like Hulu has live sports, and it's like very clear it's an advertisement. That was the genius in that. But in the way that a lot of these brands, in my experience, that I've witnessed did it, it's just inauthentic and content. These aren't quality content creators like your YouTube influencers of the world. So when repurposing it, it wouldn't really do much anyhow. And so they paid an additional hiked up rate that really wasn't worth uh, the bang for their buck. But enough on my end. I feel like
What?
that
No,
gets the point.
I have another question. So when you left the NFL agency that you're referring to, or even before that, and how it was building towards you screaming in a pillow, which I'm sorry to hear that. Um,
Thank you. I've gone to therapy at this point. We've moved past it.
yeah. Um, what was the biggest takeaways? Was it anti macro celebrity talent, or was it one off deals? Was it all the above? What were some of the things that you kind of left heading into your next step, which was Common Thread Collective?
Lack of attribution, biggest thing, biggest takeaway, without a doubt. Um, and starting to get a sense of you need to work with smaller influencers to begin with before investing $1 million into Aaron Rodgers. Where you're, I mean, we used to say this all the time. Starting with a macro influencer is like going into a bar drunk and trying to throw a bullseye at the dartboard. Like, it's just not happening. It's not happening. Maybe you get lucky, right? But you're willing to risk $1 million on throwing a bullseye? No chance. Um, and again, you can honestly, we haven't talked about this, but if you work with a collective group of micro influencers, you can have a similar, if not bigger, impact at 1/10 of the price. So there's just a better way to go about that. So I would say attribution. I craved attribution because I was just honestly, I felt like a salesperson, and that was just spewing just lies, and I was deceitful. It just wasn't right, and the only way that could right that ship is through attribution and seeing what is the actual impact of this influencer on behalf of a brand, and then just starting smaller before going bigger.
It's interesting because a lot of what, even if you Google influencer marketing agencies, a lot of that model, even at like an NFL agency, I think people come to understand that the CAAs of the world represent talent, and it's almost understood that they're going to take a cut of the deal because that's how they get paid. These movie stars or NFL players or NBA players, professional sports, things of that nature. But I found that people are actually shocked at the that influencer agencies actually represent their talent that way, and there's a lot of a lot of confusion around agencies that do that, that still have that model, or it's either confusion or it's just widely accepted that this is just how it works. Like, I'm gonna have to pay a little bit more of a fee, or they just don't even understand that that actually is going on, that there is a 20% markup. So you have like
Yeah,
all three scenarios where brands are coming to influencer agencies not knowing that there's a markup happening. They're confused on the model, or they don't think that it's the same as NFL or big time celebrity talents with these micro influencer agencies, or the 50,000 mommy blogger, things of that nature.
there's a
That creates,
ton.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a ton of conflict of interest, and that the brands are completely ignorant of a lot of the time, like you're saying. And like again, at Athletes First, we had 130 guys, but we were only pitching five. That's a massive conflict of interest in of itself. I'm not pitching the best fit for your brand. I'm not. You're coming. You need an NFL player, right, for your brand. You're Wilson Football. You need an NFL player. One, we're not pitching you the best fit out of all the NFL players. We're pitching you one of our players. So that's one conflict of interest already. Secondly, we're not pitching you the best player even out of our 130 players. We're pitching you the top five most expensive players where we make the most money in our 20% cut, and strictly platforming those people and why they're the best fit for
Yeah,
you
it's
because
10
that's
it's
how we
10
make the
grand
most
instead of
money.
$100 of a cut.
Right, right. And that's how like these agencies lose players too because the majority of them just don't get any marketing deals, and they're just like, "What the hell? You pitched me on this dream that you're gonna give me all these brand endorsement deals," and no, they never get pitched. It's just these top five guys that make the most money, and the same is true of influencer marketing agencies. Don't get it twisted. They're pitching you the most expensive people where they make the most money.
Hmm. So where do we go from here? So you start to see attribution at Common Thread Collective by leveraging the content within paid efforts, and also seeing the power of micro influencers. Those two things that you saw right away.
Yeah. So at Common Thread, very much so was able to see kind of what we talked about, the value of influencers as content creators, and that content, well, with like organic you start to see attribution, because everything with every influencer we ever worked with, they got UTM links. And so we could start to see, okay, this person has this following, this person has this level of engagement, and, try to start making correlations between that and sales from organic performance. So really getting a better gauge of that, but then really seeing the value of content creation from influencers being an effective mechanism to repurpose that content to Facebook ads, and then seeing all the attribution and visibility you could ever want to have, more at your fingertips than I could ever imagine, coming from a world with zero visibility at Athletes First. So, yeah, and then all of it was with micro influencers from the jump.
from the jump. Because I remember there was a lot of brands that you guys were working with that had
Ooh,
macro
here's one
partnerships
brand.
that,
Here's one brand.
like, it didn't take a while to wean off the macro.
So I forgot one, and this kind of was the nail in the coffin for me with macros. So massive negative experience at Athletes First with macros. Like, it's just not a good place to start. Um, first big deal was with this company at Common Thread Collective, was with a brand called Smart Cups. 120K, like within like month 1 to 2, and like I felt like, what? Like, I just brought 120K of revenue. What? This is first month too. I'm the man. And it was all for like a series of macros, and I'm like, oh no, it's gonna crush. Like, they such great brand fits.
Wait, to pause you there, they invested 120K into macro with
Yeah,
Common
and
Thread Collective, so that was the deal that you got.
yes, and
So
then
kind of
we
actually similar model to Athletes First, right? Like you just brought in this amount
very,
of money.
very, very, yeah. Um, and then literally, I don't even think it generated $1,000 in sales. I would say not even, like, inclusive of like the content being repurposed into paid media, and like it left the brand relationship with Common Thread Collective's like growth team. I still remember it was like Maddie Axes, Michelle, all these people. Like, the relationship that they had to maintain after that partnership with the influencers for the next 6 months to a year was just like repairing, repairing, repairing,
Oh
repairing.
man,
It was terrible. Oh, I went
who were
from
some of the
hero to
macros?
zero. Oh, let's see. I think it was so traumatic, I honestly just exited out of my mind. But it was with, not to put them on blast, it was with CEG. Um, a lot of the talent that CEG had at the time. Um,
Yeah,
and there was a couple other like one-off things that were smaller than that, but like with BioTrust and like the Real Housewives, like some of those like smaller deal, like 20 to 30K deals there.
like
Um,
B and C list type macros,
yeah, yeah. So there was a couple of
bachelorettes.
those, but those first 2 months of like just straight L of like investing big dollars in like pretty high tier individuals, immediately just went, and then seeing the value was really all content creation. It's just like, what are we doing? Let's just work with a ton of like micro influencers that will over deliver on content. Probably, I mean, from the people we were working with, they weren't macros for their content creation abilities. They were macros because of something else. They were an athlete, they were an artist, they were on the Real Housewives TV show. Like, they were famous for that, not for, they didn't build their following off their content creation
Right.
ability. So stopped working with those types of influencers, smaller micro influencers that built their following on their content creation ability. Um, because Common Thread at that time was predominantly Facebook ads agency. And so really was trying to hone in on how can we complement that channel along with other brand owned channels through influencers.
So it sounds like one immediate big fail with Smart Cups definitely put you over the edge where it was the LLL thing that made you go right
Well, it just
into it.
validated my entire experience at Athletes First, right? I didn't know for certain. Like, the Kool-Aid they were still trying to feed you, even though like the brand wouldn't repeat purchase. they just don't know. Like, these brands just don't know. Like, they're saying this, but they should double down with us, and it's like, I don't know, like, I'm this entry level guy, I don't have visibility into any of this. At Common Thread Collective, you could see black and white, with attribution links on the organic side, tracking links on the organic side, and then how this content would perform in paid media on the Facebook side of things, like, where everything is completely visible. It did not generate 1% ROI on the investment. No, no. So it just, like, validated that. It was like, yikes, this is terrible.
So if a brand owner or even a marketing agency or freelancer, anybody listening to this that is tempted still, even after listening to all this conversation, is tempted still by macro celebrity type talent, and maybe they have the budget because, and so they feel like they can get that. Is there ever, does it ever make sense to work with the macro? And we should probably define this real quick. A macro, how we define it, is probably above 500,000 of following.
Mhm,
But we're also talking about like household names, name recognized people, thumb stopping names, not even necessarily their content, but just like what we said at the beginning, Jessica Alba, The Rock,
mhm,
like household names, not like your B, C list type celebrities. But if we're going by social following, it would still be those people, the 1 million follower bachelorette third place finisher, but that she has a million followers, that type of thing. So, does it ever make sense?
100%, for sure. Um, Not yet. I'm just assuming, like, unless you have like, such a plethora of data around, all your influencer partnerships. But I mean, we would just work with a ton of micros to begin with, see what works, what doesn't work, what type of content, what type of influencer persona, what demographic, and slowly work your way up. Start with 0 to 50K, and then 50K to 100K, 100K to 200K in following, not money, definitely not money, in following. Um, and then slowly work your way up to continue to find influencers at every tier. Uh, it's not, the goal is not to get to that macro, I would say, either, but just to find ambassadors that ultimately align with your brand or great advocates for you at every level of influencer. So there is a place. Not yet, probably. Work your way up.
Yeah, let it be the capstone of your influencer part program. Let it be something that's, I mean, very few brands I think actually have budgets. It's kind of like the people that drive super nice cars even though they can't afford it. Very few people are actually can't afford super nice cars. It's like the same type of thing I feel with brands and their budgets with macros. Very few, they're all spending it. They are trying to spend it based on they see their competitor doing it, or they can't help themselves
Right.
primarily. But I think it can be effective, obviously, as someone that, what we would say is a flag bearer, just someone that literally just is going to represent your brand for at least a year. We're not talking like a one-off post with a macro,
Mm.
but something that you actually like build up to, where you can have that person represent your brand consistently on their website everywhere, and it's a household name. Uh, so
Yeah.
interesting, interesting stuff.
Yeah. So to sum it up, my experience from Athletes First to CTC, biggest takeaways: there is a conflict of interest with influencer agencies that represent talent, for sure. Um, Attribution is a must in these partnerships, and there's ways to see that. There's visibility into that. Don't let agencies fool you. It's not the truth. Micros, to begin with, content creation value. Biggest takeaways. Um, Content creation value being, and the biggest takeaway from that content creation value as well. Common Thread Collective also offered a studio shoot, and this really got my wheels turning. That was, pretty expensive, quite honestly, um, for the amount of content that they got back. Where when working with micro influencers, in comparison to that, with the content that they provided, was probably 1/5 of the cost for 10x the deliverables. And a lot of the time when repurposing the studio shoot assets versus the influencer assets would outperform the studio shoot assets. So that was another thing from Common Thread Collective that got the wheels churning, as a takeaway, before heading to kinship. But that is way too much on me. That's my experience with the broken model. I want to hear your experiences. This was like a 30-minute roast of my experience, which I love it within the broken model. But it's time to transition into your experience in it.
All right, that's all for today. If you'd like some help developing your influence marketing campaign, go ahead and DM us on Twitter. Links are in the description. Or you can head to kinship.co to learn more, and you can book a call there. That's KYNSHIP.co. At kinship.co, you also find tools, templates, and resources, all designed to help you grow an influencer campaign that drives visibility and sales, not just likes. Thanks for tuning in as always, and we'll see you next week.